Welcome back. A new poll from Emerson College finds progressive candidate Graham Platner holds a significant lead over Governor Janet Mills in Maine's closely watched Senate Democratic primary. Platner has a 27-point advantage, and 13% of voters said they are undecided. The Democrats are hoping to unseat longtime Republican Senator Susan Collins in the general election. Want to bring in our political reporter panel now. Daniella Diaz covers Congress for NOTUS, and Matt Brown, who covers the same beat for the Associated Press, as do I, which is why we see each other all the time, but nice to have you all in studio. So Daniella, I just want to get your take on these numbers.
I've been watching this race really closely. I think it's one of the most interesting primaries that is taking place in the country. Of course, we saw what happened in Texas, but this is really a test about, an older candidate. If Janet Mills were to be sworn in, she'd be the oldest senator ever sworn in Congress historically. And then Graham Platner, an outsider, oyster fisherman. The fact that he's ahead and he's not really the establishment pick by Democrats is saying a lot about where Democratic voters are right now. And so another thing to point out is in this poll, he's actually ahead of Susan Collins, should it be a matchup with Graham Platner and Susan Collins, something that I think is very much worrying Republicans right now because they would like to keep that seat. They need that seat for the majority. So a lot of warning signs for Republicans on this, but also Democrats when they really were hoping Janet Mills could be the pick.
Yeah, and we heard from her earlier today. She did an interview on MS Now. Let's take a listen.
Tom Tillis said it publicly, probably shouldn't have politically, but he said it publicly. He said, we want Graham Platner to be the nominee of the party in Maine because Susan Collins can't wait to run against him. That's a Republican saying that.
I mean, Matt, obviously Platner has some baggage, some controversies that he has tried to overcome, but could those be liabilities if he ends up being the one facing off against Collins?
I mean, absolutely. Look, Graham Platner is a genuinely polarizing candidate in the most academic sense of the word that you can say. He truly has inspired so many Democratic-based voters in Maine and beyond, and that's why national progressives have really invested in this race. They're bringing him to his rallies. Just this Saturday, there's going to be a very large progressive rally that Platner is going to be at alongside other mainline progressive candidates. At the same time, the controversies over the alleged Nazi tattoo and other instances show that Republicans are, in many cases, licking their lips at the opportunity to potentially attack Platner in the general because they believe that they have the advantage. This really goes to the identity of the Democratic Party at the moment and what they believe is going to resonate with voters. Do they trust that voters are going to find Platner resonant and that his charisma that's clearly resonating with the base is going to be able to make it to moderate voters? Or is this going to be a situation where the Democrats are not in touch with what persuadable middle-of-the-road voters in Maine and elsewhere are going to be receptive to?
Yeah, I want to switch back to what's happening on Capitol Hill. Of course, this ongoing partial government shutdown. We saw the House take yet another vote on Homeland Security funding. Let's take a listen to what Mike Johnson had to say following that vote.
We have now, again, for the third time, we just funded the entire Department of Homeland Security. I understand what the Senate's doing. John Thune, Leader Thune, is in a terrible situation because he has Chuck Schumer and the Democrats over there refusing to take care of business and do their job. If they break away that subset, I suppose we'd have to fund it through reconciliation and find some other means. But it's a shame that only one party on Capitol Hill is willing to fund all of the security and safety of the American people. We cannot believe it's come to that, but it has.
If the Senate gets that through the Senate, will you put it on the floor?
We'll have to see.
So interesting there that obviously, we know that the House bill doesn't have the votes in the Senate, but now it sounds like the Speaker isn't necessarily committing to taking up whatever emerges out of the Senate. Why is that?
Well, what you're seeing here is really we're reaching a crisis point in these negotiations. I mean, Democrats don't feel that they need to budge on this because of the impasse that they are on regulations for different DHS officers, especially when it comes to ICE. And given that the White House and the House, now that you're seeing, are showing that they're willing to maybe bypass, the Senate in certain ways, the president just now floated the possibility, we understand, from senators to declare an emergency order, at the same time that some airports are saying that they are going to potentially have to just cease TSA operations entirely. That crisis moment is causing folks to potentially even go further into into their holes here and take crisis measures from the administration's perspective, or potentially even more obstinate measures from Democrats.
Yeah, and turning to another controversy on the Hill, Danielle, of course, we have the House Ethics Committee, which is holding a rare public hearing on fraud allegations against Sheila Sherfilis McCormick. Tell us a little bit more about this case.
Right. She's been accused of using FEMA funds that were granted to a company that she owns for personal use. This is a major allegation. It's been very difficult for her to be able to defend this. And Democrats are also not necessarily defending her either. Look, Speaker Mike Johnson has been very clear that this process needs to play out, which is interesting because a lot of this has happened in his own party. But we're hearing from Hakeem Jeffries, not necessarily the minority leader, Hakeem Jeffries, I should say, not necessarily defending her, but saying we need to watch how this hearing goes. It's a public hearing, which is very rare. It's happening as we're speaking right now. And it's going to be really important to see how this plays out, considering should there be any sort of action in this hearing that makes her look bad, we could see potentially an expulsion vote from Republicans who have been threatening that, or, you know, anything else that could happen on the House floor to censure her, because this is a serious allegation that she has to defend. But clearly, Democrats not coming out of the woodwork to defend her. They understand that this is serious.
All right, Daniella Diaz, Matt Brown, we'll see you back on Capitol Hill, I'm sure, in the very near future. But thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having us.